On the highway, a group of young men on motorcycles were recklessly weaving through traffic. They seemed to intentionally swerve close to a white car, causing the heavyset man inside to panic. He instinctively tried to hit the brakes, but they weren't working. Seeing pedestrians crossing the road ahead, he didn't hesitate to swerve the car into the sidewalk, bringing it to a halt. At that moment, a luxurious black car behind them suddenly lost control and flipped in the air. After several violent impacts, the person inside was likely in bad shape. Both men were immediately rushed to the emergency room. The heavyset man wasn't seriously injured, requiring only a neck brace. The well-dressed man beside him, however, was covered in blood and deeply unconscious. Strangely, both men shared the same name, Hyun Cheol, and even the same birth date. Despite this, their fates would be drastically different. The heavyset man, with his minor injuries, quickly regained consciousness. The dapper Hyun Cheol, however, remained comatose, his chances of survival slim. No one could have predicted that the seemingly healthy heavyset man, while eating, would suddenly suffer cardiac arrest. By the time his wife arrived to check on him, he was gone. At the same time, the man who shared his name also passed away. A funeral for the well-dressed Hyun Cheol was quickly arranged in a VIP room. But then, something bizarre occurred. As the funeral home staff were dressing the body, one of the workers noticed the corpse's leg twitch. Thinking his old eyes were playing tricks on him, he asked a colleague to confirm and then glanced towards the deceased's family. But as he turned back, the corpse's hand suddenly moved. Then, the dead man sat bolt upright, causing the funeral worker to faint on the spot. The well-dressed Hyun Cheol's family froze, screaming in disbelief. No one knew that while the body was that of the well-dressed Hyun Cheol, the person inside was someone else entirely. Hours earlier, in a boundless void, a young man materialized in the middle of a street. With his handsome, K-pop idol looks, no one would have guessed he was a Grim Reaper. His task that day was to collect the soul of a man named Hyun Cheol. Upon arriving at the hospital, Otto quickly located the room of the patient named Hyun Cheol. However, the soul he collected belonged to the heavyset man. Otto hadn't realized he'd taken the wrong soul. When he brought the heavyset man's soul to the gates of the underworld, the system flagged an error. The soul that should have been taken was that of the well-dressed Hyun Cheol. Otto quickly returned the heavyset man's soul to his body, only to discover that his family had already cremated it. The heavyset man's soul was in despair, unsure of what to do. Left with no other choice, Otto placed the heavyset man's soul into the body of the well-dressed Hyun Cheol, resulting in the shocking resurrection that stunned the entire hospital. Doctors formed a specialized team to investigate this miraculous phenomenon. Family and colleagues were equally astonished by Hyun Cheol's return from the dead. Waking up, the heavyset man couldn't believe he was alive, assuming his body had been incinerated. Before he could process anything, the well-dressed Hyun Cheol's mother rushed to embrace her son, thanking heaven for his return. However, Hyun Cheol insisted he wasn't her son. It wasn't until he saw himself in the mirror that he realized the shocking truth. The heavyset man cried out in panic, seeing his body transformed into that of a younger, more handsome man. His mother, believing her son had become mentally unstable after the ordeal, took his hand and assured him that she would spend all her money to cure him, no matter the cost. Overwhelmed by the situation, the heavyset man borrowed her phone and asked her to send the doctors away so he could have some peace. He immediately called his wife to break the news. Yeon Hwa, devastated by her husband's sudden death, was numb to everything. She was sitting in a daze when she received a call from an unknown number. The voice on the other end rambled about his body being cremated, having to inhabit someone else's body, and being her husband. Furious, Yeon Hwa assumed it was a cruel prank. Just then, Hin, the wife of the well-dressed Hyun Cheol, entered the room. The heavyset man asked her what kind of person this body belonged to, how old he was. Hin looked at the man who was supposed to be her husband with a strange feeling, as the original Hyun Cheol had been cold and unfeeling. Their marriage had been on the verge of divorce. There was nothing left between them but resentment. This was a stark contrast to the heavyset man, a chef by profession. Despite a hard life spent cooking, he had always been cheerful and optimistic, deeply in love with his wife, Yeon Hwa. Not long after, the well-dressed Hyun Cheol's best friend, Dak Pool, came to visit. Seeing that Hyun Cheol didn't even seem to know who he was, Dak-pool was deeply saddened. He assumed his friend had amnesia and dismissed everything Hyun Cheol said. When asked his name, the heavyset man still answered with his own. This response made Dak-pool chuckle dryly. He didn't bother listening to any further explanations. He concluded that Hyun Cheol could only remember his own name and had forgotten everything else. Seeing that explanations were futile, the heavyset man feigned helplessness and asked Dak-pool for help. Due to their strong bond, Dak-pool readily agreed. He went outside and distracted the nurses, creating an opportunity for Hyun Cheol to sneak out. Unfortunately, his escape attempt was noticed by the doctors. This led to a game of cat and mouse throughout the hospital, with Hyun Cheol running from the doctors. He made it all the way to the rooftop, only to find all the doors locked. Seeing that he was about to be caught, Hyun Cheol took a drastic measure. He tied a fire hose to the railing and threw the other end down. Somehow, the rescue team and Hyun Cheol's family were already gathered below, urging him not to do anything reckless. But at this point, the heavyset man's soul inside was desperate to escape, so Hyun Cheol closed his eyes and climbed down the hose. However, the earlier chase had exhausted the body, and he lost his grip, plummeting downwards. Fortunately, the rescue team had prepared an inflatable cushion, and Hyun Cheol landed safely. In the ensuing chaos, he quickly broke through the rescue team's perimeter and ran towards a car where Dak-pool was waiting. The escape was a success. Immediately, Hyun Cheol asked Dak-pool to drive him home. At his gate, he encountered Yoon Hwa and grabbed her hand, insisting that he was her husband. But his words, coming from Hyun Cheol's face, only angered Yoon Hwa further. She recognized his voice as the one from the phone call the previous day and chased him away with a broom, believing he was mocking her deceased husband. The heavyset man could only leave, heartbroken. Seeing his friend being chased away, Dak-pool couldn't stand it any longer and dragged Hyun Cheol to his actual home, a luxurious villa where the beautiful Hae-jin was waiting. It was a much nicer place than the heavyset man's own home, but it was unfamiliar, filled with unfamiliar faces. He entered timidly and awkwardly, even closing the bathroom door carefully when he needed to use it. Trapped in a completely different identity, in a strange house, the heavyset man wept with despair. He stood under the shower, but the water couldn't wash away his loneliness. After his shower, Hyun Cheol tiptoed out to find Hae-jin entering the room. He felt awkward and unsure of how to act. Hae-jin also felt uncomfortable seeing her husband like this. Night fell, and they slept in separate beds. It turned out they had been sleeping apart for a long time. A long day finally came to an end. The next morning, the first thing the heavyset man did was check his body. Seeing that nothing had changed, that he still had the same handsome face, he walked out sadly. Hae-jin had prepared breakfast, but Hyun Cheol could only eat with his head down. Using his amnesia as an excuse, he asked Hae-jin about the real Hyun Cheol. Hae-jin explained that he was a high-ranking bank executive with a massive ego. His arrogance had suffocated their relationship and driven their marriage into a dead end. Worse, he had a mistress, making their marriage a sham. Hearing this, the heavyset man felt that this body was truly cursed. He apologized to Hae-jin and asked if he could stay temporarily until people believed his story. Hae-jin was surprised by his apology. However, believing he had amnesia, she didn't question him further and left. Meanwhile, a strange man came to visit Yoon Hwa, the heavyset man's wife. Thinking he was a burglar, she didn't hesitate to grab a bowl of salt and throw it in his face. Unable to get any information from Yoon Hwa, the man went to her daughter's school and waited. Through her friends, he managed to arrange a meeting with the girl. He asked her about her parents' relationship. Mentioning her recently deceased father, the girl burst into tears, only asking the man not to bring up her father in front of her mother, because it would cause her so much grief that she wouldn't be able to sleep. It turns out this stranger was a police officer. He was investigating the chubby man's accident. Security footage from a nearby camera showed a suspicious person tampering with the chubby man's car before the accident. The officer went to the convenience store where the footage was recorded to investigate. Coincidentally, he met Yoon Hwa working there. After he introduced himself as a police officer, Yoon Hwa's suspicion subsided. The officer explained that someone had tampered with the chubby man's car, Surprising Yoon Hwa, she quickly allowed the officer to copy the store's security footage. After copying the footage, the officer questioned Yoon Hwa about why she had cremated her husband so quickly, especially given that he had seemingly died suddenly from only minor injuries. Feeling suspicious of him, Yoon Hwa angrily retorted, "What exactly do you want to know?" Thinking back, she recalled a suspicious person approaching her husband, but she couldn't remember who it was. The officer left his business card, telling Yoon Hwa to call him if she remembered anything or saw anyone suspicious. After his soul was mistakenly taken by death, the man had to inhabit another body to live. Missing his restaurant, the chubby man returned to visit. Looking at the place where he used to work, he couldn't help but cry. He remembered that before the accident, his restaurant was on the verge of bankruptcy, forcing him to apply for a loan at the bank. However, when the bank employee checked his records, they found he already had an outstanding loan of 200 million won. Just then, the elegant mother of Hyun Cheol called. A bold idea struck the chubby man. He would ask Hyun Cheol's mother for a loan to pay off his family's debts. He immediately went to see her and received a bundle of 200 million won in cash. She even told him that if it wasn't enough, she would give him more. Overwhelmed, the chubby man burst into tears, thanking her profusely and promising to repay her as soon as he could. Seeing her son like this, his mother felt even more heartbroken, assuming he had lost his mind. Shortly after, Hyun Cheol, pretending to be a deliveryman, brought a package of money to Yoon Hwa. He claimed to be sending it on behalf of his best friend himself. Yoon Hwa was stunned, unable to believe her husband had such a good friend. That evening, the daughter looked at a photo of her father, missing him dearly. She texted his account as usual, knowing there would never be a reply. Meanwhile, the chubby man, reading his daughter's message, also wept. To help her son recover, Hyun Cheol's mother visited her daughter-in-law, Hai Jin, asking her to quit her job and stay home to care for her husband full-time. She offered to support them financially and even open a shop for Hai Jin. However, Hai Jin wasn't one to rely on others. She revealed her decision to divorce, infuriating her mother-in-law. Unable to rely on her daughter-in-law, the mother sought out Dak Pool. Believing him to be her son's best friend, she gave him a wad of cash, asking him to help Hyun Cheol regain his memory. Dak Pool verbally refused but pocketed the money anyway. Later, Dak Pool took Hyun Cheol to see a shaman for an exorcism. The shaman danced around, seemingly professional, but clumsily tripped and sprained his ankle. Hyun Cheol then enthusiastically administered first aid by splashing water in the shaman's face, much to everyone's dismay. With no other options, the chubby man continued to live as Hyun Cheol. Every day, he was greeted by his children and ate the meager breakfast Hai Jin prepared. To Hai Jin, this husband was a stranger. This morning, Hyun Cheol asked her if she had eaten and told her not to cook for him, saying a busy working person wouldn't have the energy. He also told her to eat a proper breakfast before work. After eating, he even washed the dishes himself. His unexpected concern touched Hai Jin. After breakfast, the chubby man, in the elegant Hyun Cheol's form, went to his daughter's school. He intended to hug her, but Hyun Cheol's daughter texted him the news that she had ranked first in the academy. At that moment, Hyun Cheol froze, unable to approach his own daughter. Carrying his heartache home, he received a call from Hyun Cheol's mistress. Hearing a woman's voice acting intimately familiar, Hyun Cheol was confused and quickly hung up. Just then, Hai Jin walked in, reminding him of Hyun Cheol's affair. The chubby man was disgusted with this unfaithful body. At that moment, Yoon Hwa, wanting to express her gratitude, called Hyun Cheol's number. The chubby man was extremely flustered to hear from his wife. Yoon Hwa asked for the caller's name, but Hyun Cheol couldn't bring himself to tell her. He urged Yoon Hwa to eat well and take care of herself, not to exhaust herself. He promised he would return one day, or maybe not. His words struck Yoon Hwa as odd. However, she didn't overthink it, simply assuming her husband had a good, albeit slightly eccentric, friend when he was alive. Early in the morning, while no one was home, Hyun Cheol snuck back to the chubby man's house. He rummaged through the place, looking for his underwear and a few personal belongings. Looking at his own ID card, the chubby man felt a pang of longing for his former self. Back at Hyun Cheol's home, Hai-jin noticed the bathroom was a mess after her shower. While tidying up, she discovered a pile of unfamiliar underwear in her husband's drawer. She confronted Hyun-cheol with the underwear. Embarrassed, Hyun-cheol claimed they were more comfortable. At the same time, Yeon Hwa discovered her husband's underwear was missing and contemplated calling the police to report an underwear thief. Life in a new body left the chubby man feeling lost and adrift. He received a call from Hyun-cheol's mistress. Upon meeting her, she pushed him against the wall and kissed him. The chubby man, a man of integrity, quickly pushed her away, calling her frightening. The mistress was stunned, disbelieving that this was Hyun-cheol. Pushing her aside, Hyun-cheol immediately left, muttering about the stupidity of this body, abandoning a beautiful wife and smart children for someone like her. Returning home and seeing Hai-jin, the chubby man felt guilty on Hyun-cheol's behalf. Although he tried to sneak into his room, Hai-jin noticed him and brought him his medicine. She was shocked to see Hyun-cheol down the whole bowl in one gulp. She told him he would regret it when his memory returned, as he had never behaved like this before. Lost in thought, the chubby man apologized to her. He apologized for the affair and for hurting her. Hearing this apology, Hai-jin felt some of her resentment fade. After Hai-jin left the room, the chubby man opened his phone and saw a text message from his daughter. She thanked him for helping their family. The chubby man, posing as her father's friend, told her to eat well and sleep well. He then sent her an animated GIF he often used to send her. Seeing the GIF, his daughter burst into tears, overwhelmed with longing for her father. The next morning, she met with Hyun-cheol as planned. The chubby man ordered her favorite food and asked her how her family was doing. Through his daughter, he learned that his family was struggling financially after his death. Yeon Hwa had to work at a convenience store, and his elderly father took on night shifts at a construction site to support the family. Hearing this, the chubby man felt heartbroken, but could do nothing more than encourage his daughter to stay strong and to call him if she needed anything. Overwhelmed with sadness, Hyun-cheol invited Dak-pool out for drinks that evening. Dak-pool recounted their close friendship and how Hyun-cheol had helped him financially throughout the years. The chubby man listened, knowing he couldn't say anything. As he started to get drunk, the chubby man confessed about being mistakenly taken by death. When he returned, his body had been cremated, forcing him to live in Hyun-cheol's body. He longed to return to his own life, but couldn't, leaving him feeling incredibly lonely. Otto overheard the chubby man's words from another dimension. He felt incredibly guilty that his mistake had caused the chubby man such torment. Otto pleaded with a higher-ranking death god for help. On one side, the police officer received a notification from the chubby uncle's auto repair shop. Earlier that morning, Hyun-cheol, suddenly remembering his loan agreement, had gone to the garage to retrieve it. However, the mechanic refused to hand it over, stating it was evidence in a case. Upon hearing this, the officer searched the car and indeed found a contract. He took it to Yeon Hwa and inquired about it. She explained that the chubby uncle had intended to apply for a bank loan, but the bank informed him that a loan already existed in his name. At this point, the officer became suspicious of the mysterious man. After the officer left, Yeon Hwa pondered the situation and realized the voice of the friend who had given her money was strikingly similar to the man dressed in hospital clothes she'd encountered earlier. She recalled how the man had persistently claimed to be her husband, leaving her wavering between belief and disbelief. Meanwhile, Hai-jin prepared medicine for her husband. She noticed he hadn't touched his pineapple, his favorite fruit. As usual, Hyun-cheol swallowed his medicine in one gulp. When she asked him why he hadn't eaten the pineapple, he simply said he didn't like it. Unable to contain her suspicion any longer, Hai-jin confronted him. "You're not Hyun-cheol. Who are you really?" The chubby uncle was taken aback but insisted he was indeed Song Hyun-cheol. Hearing this, Hai-jin chided herself for being so suspicious, attributing her husband's odd behavior to his amnesia. Once Hai-jin left, the chubby uncle breathed a sigh of relief. He had chosen to lie. That night, he couldn't sleep. Noticing his restlessness, Hai-jin asked, "Hyun-cheol, do you want this?" He froze, fearing some embarrassing request. However, she simply handed him a book, explaining that he used to read whenever he had trouble sleeping. The chubby uncle picked up the book, but the words were like a foreign language. He went out to the living room and apologized to Hyun Cheol's body for lying. He had no other choice. It was the only way to prevent chaos. He felt sorry for Yeon Hwa. Although she suspected a miracle, she ultimately didn't dare to believe it possible. The inevitable arrived. The next day, the chubby uncle had to don a suit and go to work as a director. Upon seeing him, all the employees stood up to greet him. Hyun Cheol entered, meekly bowing, surprising everyone. He had been a tyrannical, heartless director known for reprimanding and firing employees. His secretary, accustomed to being berated, felt uncomfortable with the sudden politeness and went to tell the vice president that Hyun Cheol was acting strangely. The vice president entered and received a respectful greeting from Hyun Cheol. He, too, emerged with a bewildered expression, mirroring the secretary's confusion. Uncomfortable in his new role, the chubby uncle took off his jacket to begin working when his subordinate entered. He was startled to recognize her as the woman he'd been with the other night. This wretched body was having an affair with his subordinate. Fortunately, before she could speak, Dak Pool, the bank's security guard, entered and saved the day. Hyun Cheol confessed his anxiety to Dak Pool, admitting he had no idea how to function as a director. Dak Pool reassured his friend, reminding him that he had always been the most brilliant, even back in school. Just then, a call came in from an overseas partner. The chubby uncle had no choice but to answer. To his astonishment, he suddenly understood the client's language. Terrified, he couldn't believe his ears. Moreover, when he opened an economics book on the desk, he found he could comprehend it perfectly. He realized that despite the soul swap, the intellect seemed to remain. He decided to try working on the computer. However, when he logged into the internal account, he didn't know the password. At that moment, the bank's president called, welcoming him back to work. The chubby uncle confessed he couldn't remember his password. The president readily provided it. Hyun Cheol thanked him profusely and quickly typed it in. The password worked. Wait a minute, how did the president know his password? Without dwelling on it, the chubby uncle got ready to leave work. He asked the staff whom he needed permission from to go home. His question stunned everyone. As the director, he could leave whenever he wanted. Upon hearing this, Hyun Cheol announced, "Everyone, I'm going home." Although he said he was going home, Hyun Cheol went to the library to test his intellect. To his surprise, he could understand books in English, Chinese, and even Japanese. The chubby uncle even found Hyun Cheol's autobiography. Reading Hyun Cheol's profile filled him with awe and a sudden sense of inadequacy, leaving him completely deflated. At that moment, the Grim Reaper Otto appeared beside him, questioning the chubby uncle's intelligence not to the uncle himself, but to a higher-ranking Grim Reaper. The Superior Reaper explained that although Hyun Cheol was dead, his brain remained. Therefore, all his knowledge was still intact. To demonstrate this, the Superior Reaper blinked and transformed into a beautiful, alluring woman, sauntering in front of Hyun Cheol. As if by instinct, Hyun Cheol's eyes followed her legs. This proved one thing, whether it was Hyun Cheol or the chubby uncle, their shared weakness was beautiful women. The Superior Reaper warned Otto to start worrying because, at this rate, the chubby uncle would eventually fall for Hyun Cheol's beautiful wife, Hae-jin. When that happened, would he still want to return to his real wife? Indeed, upon returning home and seeing Hae-jin, the chubby uncle invited her to dinner. During the meal, he asked how she had met Hyun Cheol. Learning that Hyun Cheol had ardently pursued her, he nodded in agreement, acknowledging her beauty. Hearing this, Hae-jin felt a flicker of something. That night, not seeing Hae-jin come to bed, Hyun Cheol went to the living room to check on her. He learned that their son had run away. Upon hearing that his son had gone treasure hunting, Hyun Cheol laughed, saying, "All sons are like that." Hae-jin was surprised that he wasn't scolding her as usual. When she fell asleep on the sofa, he gently covered her with a blanket, a gesture that warmed her heart. This amnesiac husband was rekindling her feelings. Back to the chubby uncle's case, the police officer, after investigating all night, was approached by a man claiming to be a reporter. While pretending to gather information about the case, the man planted a listening device under the officer's desk. Unaware, the officer chatted with his colleague about the case after the reporter left, speculating that the chubby uncle's accident was connected to some shady illegal loan. He had no idea that the entire conversation was being overheard. With this suspicion, the officer went to the bank where the chubby uncle had taken out the loan to investigate. The secretary corroborated the officer's information, stating he remembered the chubby uncle's case clearly because he had the same name and birth date as their branch manager. Upon hearing this, the officer immediately went to see Hyun Cheol. After listening to the officer, the chubby uncle suddenly remembered. The bank he had gone to for the loan was where Hyun Cheol worked. He rushed outside, and the memories of that day came flooding back. The person who had refused him the loan and blamed him was none other than this body, Hyun Cheol. Distraught, the chubby uncle went to the bathroom and looked at the hateful face in the mirror. Unable to contain his anger, he punched the reflection. This scene was witnessed by the vice president, who, terrified, assumed Hyun Cheol had multiple personalities. Filled with resentment, the chubby uncle returned and told the officer he would cooperate with the investigation. After the officer left, the chubby uncle closed his eyes and took a deep breath. But when he opened them, he seemed like a different person. His hand automatically played Hyun Cheol's favorite music, and he listened calmly. Suddenly, as if regaining consciousness, he jolted. It felt like the refined Hyun Cheol had taken over his body. Hyun Cheol unconsciously walked outside, looking at the employees with his usual cold gaze. Suddenly, someone called his name from behind. It was the president, there to welcome him back. In reality, he was there to gauge whether Hyun Cheol's amnesia was genuine. The situation grew increasingly complicated. The chubby uncle turned to alcohol and summoned his mistress, asking if she knew anything about his loan agreement. To his shock, she told him not to investigate further, because he was the one who forged it. This revelation struck him like a bolt of lightning. Meanwhile, Yeon Hwa went to the convenience store to ask her coworker if they had seen the suspect in the photo. At that very moment, the suspect appeared right beside her. Trying to stay calm, she pretended to step outside to make a call to the police officer. However, before she could say anything, the suspect, presumably KH letter 1A3 and guy, bumped into her, causing her phone to drop. He then picked it up for her. Facing him, the sunlight blinded Yeon Hwa, preventing her from seeing him clearly. Terrified, she froze, but the suspect simply turned and walked away, leaving her with a deep sense of unease. After some thought, she decided to text Hyun Cheol to meet, having discovered that he was behind the fraudulent loan. The portly man, furious and in disbelief, ignored Yeon Hwa's message. At the same time, Hae-jin called her husband about their son running away again, only to be met with Hyun Cheol snapping at her to handle it herself, leaving her deeply disappointed. It felt like her husband's true nature was resurfacing. The portly man, trapped in Hyun Cheol's body, went to the park, remembering how Hyun Cheol had refused him a loan that day. He remained resentful, forced to live in the body of the man who had ruined his life. Hyun Cheol's phone rang again, a number that had called hundreds of times. The portly man abruptly hung up, only to receive a text from a woman. He went to the designated location and discovered she was a trainer at the gym. After a brief exchange, he realized she was also involved with the original Hyun Cheol. He knew Hyun Cheol was bad, but not this bad. Just how many women were involved with him? Unable to contain himself any longer, the portly man, in Hyun Cheol's guise, threw himself into a chaotic workout. He ran on the treadmill at the highest speed until he collapsed. Every exercise was performed with excessive force, not for health, but to punish the body he inhabited. He was venting his anger and seeking revenge. He continued until he was the only one left in the gym. The next morning, back home, looking at Hyun Cheol's neatly organized wardrobe, the portly man felt a surge of resentment and ripped the clothes down, throwing them on the floor. Unaware of the portly man's inner turmoil, Hae-jin berated Hyun Cheol for not caring about their children, blaming everything on her and accusing her of failing in her duties. Overwhelmed by her nagging, he finally yelled, "Shut up! All of this is because of your husband. He's the one who caused my accident, and my daughter lost her father." His outburst stunned Hae-jin, realizing she had gone too far. The portly man, finally calming down, left. He then politely texted Yeon Hwa to meet. They arranged to see each other at a cafe. Yeon Hwa wanted to voice her suspicions, asking if he was really her husband. Though desperate to reunite with his family, the portly man denied it. He needed to investigate his loan, but couldn't do so as Hyun Cheol. He claimed to be Deedak Pool, a bank manager, who merely bought lottery tickets with her husband. hence their familiarity. Maintaining his bizarre behavior to conceal his identity, he claimed to have a mental illness to explain his eccentricities. Hearing this, Yoon Hwa's suspicions lessened. However, after leaving, they both received calls from the school. Hyun Cheol's son had teased the portly man's daughter, resulting in her punching him and giving him a bloody nose. When Hyun Cheol arrived and saw his daughter, he defended her, claiming she was astigmatic and had punched the wrong boy. This left both Yoon Hwa and the teachers bewildered. Whose parent was he, anyway? At that point, Hae-jin arrived and apologized to Yoon Hwa and her daughter. The two mothers reconciled peacefully. However, as they were leaving, Hae-jin felt a pang of discomfort seeing her husband hugging Yoon Hwa's daughter affectionately while their own son, the one who had been hit, stood by. Back at the bank, the portly man accessed Hyun Cheol's account and discovered a balance of 2 billion won. Incredulous, he assumed the money was ill-gotten gains and trashed the office in a fit of rage. Further fueling his anger, he read employee complaints revealing Hyun Cheol's tyrannical management style, making each workday a battle for his subordinates. He summoned the deputy director, hoping to understand if the money was indeed dirty. Before the deputy director could grasp Hyun Cheol's question, his mother arrived. It turned out that Dak Pool, having witnessed Hyun Cheol's interaction with Yoon Hwa, had rushed to tell his mother about his supposed affair with an older woman. Hyun Cheol's mother confronted him, first urging him to buy a decent car instead of taking the bus. She then insisted he quit his job, claiming the 2 billion won inheritance from his father was more than enough to live comfortably without working. The portly man, realizing the money was inherited, not illicit, was stunned. But that wasn't the main issue. His mother pressed him about Yoon Hwa. He claimed he would handle it, mentioning they even had a child together. His mother was shocked but demanded to meet her grandchild, insisting the child couldn't be left to fend for themselves. She went to Yoon Hwa's house, but when Yoon Hwa opened the door, she simply started dancing to music, leaving Yoon Hwa to assume she was mentally unstable and ending the interaction. This was actually the work of the death god Otto, who was nearby and wanted to prevent the truth from coming out. Undeterred, Hyun Cheol's mother scheduled another meeting with Yoon Hwa. Yoon Hwa was taken aback, encountering this strange woman again after the bizarre first impression. Hyun Cheol's mother inquired about the length of their relationship, apologizing for leaving her to raise their child alone. Yoon Hwa was utterly confused. Otto, sitting nearby, exasperated by the situation, used his powers again, forcing Hyun Cheol's mother to break into another dance in public. However, even Otto's interventions couldn't contain the escalating situation, as a police officer became interested in Hyun Cheol, a man with the same name, birth date, and surname as the portly man. The officer summoned Yoon Hwa. She then learned that the man calling himself Dak Pool shared her husband's real name. Telling the officer, "He's my husband's friend," only deepened the officer's suspicion of Hyun Cheol's involvement, though he couldn't quite piece the story together. Meanwhile, at the bank, Hyun Cheol's mistress, eavesdropping, learned about the police investigation and warned him to stop investigating the loan. When he didn't react, she barged into his office, demanding he cease his inquiries. He simply asked how she knew about the investigation, leaving her speechless. Luckily, his assistant arrived, providing her an opportunity to escape. Hyun Cheol then asked his assistant for help reviewing loan records. After some digging, he discovered his loan actually the portly man's loan was created by another employee who had resigned 6 months prior. Even stranger, the loan was repaid the day after his accident. These inconsistencies puzzled him. Clearly, the loan was fraudulent, and someone, fearing exposure, had repaid it immediately after his death and subsequent revival. Who was responsible? Was it actually Hyun Cheol, the man he was now impersonating? Seeing his frustration, the deputy director offered a clue. Hyun Cheol routinely recorded meetings. Reviewing them might jog his memory. Hyun Cheol watched the recordings, witnessing his original self's arrogant and domineering behavior. Suddenly, Hyun Cheol's real memories flooded back, memories of the day after the portly man had left. His assistant had mentioned the portly man sharing his name. Hyun Cheol's bewildered expression in the recording suggested he hadn't known the portly man at all. Overwhelmed by these foreign memories, the portly man began to convulse. Was Hyun Cheol's consciousness starting to take over? To make ends meet, Yoon Hwa took a job selling insurance. Lacking a large network, she even pitched her services to a police officer. Impressed by her enthusiasm, he suggested they meet at Hyun Cheol's bank to discuss it further. Seeing Yoon Hwa arrive at the bank, Dong mistakenly assumed she was there to choose an identity and meet him. Yoon Hwa, realizing that Dak Pool wasn't who she expected, was about to speak when Hyun Cheol greeted her warmly. With the police officer also present, the three of them ended up in a meeting room, where Yoon Hwa presented her insurance plans. Watching his wife struggle, the portly Dong felt a pang of guilt and stepped out to ask Dak Pool if he was interested in buying insurance. Inside, the police officer voiced his suspicions to Hyun Cheol about the uncanny coincidence of their shared name and birth date. When Hyun Cheol returned, Yoon Hwa asked him why he had lied about his name. Thinking quickly, he claimed he didn't want to remind her of her deceased husband. He then agreed to buy an insurance policy, his excessive eagerness further puzzling the officer. Since the director's accident, the bank's ranking had dropped, causing anxiety among the employees. Hyun Cheol had always held the top spot. Even the CEO visited the bank, ostensibly to invite Hyun Cheol to a welcome-back dinner, but really to probe him about an unfinished deal. The CEO was taken aback by Hyun Cheol's subservient demeanor. Before leaving, he gave a surreptitious signal to Hyun Cheol's former mistress, a gesture witnessed by the vice president. Clearly, a significant secret was being kept among them. To get to the bottom of it, Hyun Cheol called his former mistress into his office. He asked if they had falsified any other loans besides the portly man's. She claimed ignorance. Looking her in the eye, Hyun Cheol asserted his pride and reputation, questioning whether he would ever stoop to such dirty tricks. His words and demeanor unnerved her, leaving her frozen in place. After she left, the portly man sighed, having just practiced mimicking Hyun Cheol's speech and mannerisms. Just then, Dak Pool informed Hyun Cheol that the CEO had called and invited him to dinner. Hyun Cheol became agitated, stating that both he and the real Hyun Cheol had been deceived. The portly man began to see the cracks in the facade. Dak Pool, assuming his friend was having another episode, paid no attention. On their way to the dinner, Dak Pool remarked on Hyun Cheol's unusual taste, questioning his involvement with someone like Yoon Hwa. He then listed Hyun Cheol's past conquests, mispronouncing one name, which Hyun Cheol corrected. This startled Dak Pool, causing him to slam on the brakes. "Did you just remember something?" he asked. The portly man was stunned. The sophisticated Hyun Cheol's memories were indeed returning. Even as they entered the dining room filled with powerful figures, the portly man experienced flashes of Hyun Cheol's past memories. The big deal these officials wanted involved using Hyun Cheol to secure loans for them. Their conversation suggested Hyun Cheol had already helped them, and tonight's dinner was a thank you. The portly man listened in disbelief, shocked by Hyun Cheol's ambition. Meanwhile, Hyun Cheol's wife, unable to bear his recent outburst, handed him divorce papers. Hyun Cheol, heartbroken, asked Hae Jin, "Why not sooner? Why now?" Despite his pain, he agreed to the divorce. His acquiescence left Hae Jin with mixed emotions. At work, Hae Jin excelled and was promoted to a full-time position and team leader by the new director. He took her out to celebrate. Afterward, they went for a walk. He confided that he, too, was divorced and searching for true happiness. On the way home, seeing Hae Jin and her colleague walking, the new director offered them a ride. After her colleague was dropped off, Hae Jin and the director were alone in the car as he drove her home. He confessed he could be better than her current husband. Hae Jin rejected his advances, reminding him they were colleagues and that giving her a ride was already pushing boundaries. Arriving home, she found her husband sitting dejectedly. As Hae Jin approached, she saw Hyun Cheol's pitiful expression. He pleaded with her for help. Hae Jin, unable to contain herself any longer, sat down and demanded to know why he was so affectionate with Yoon Hwa's daughter. Hyun Cheol explained that it was because the girl's father had recently passed away. Finally, he asked Hae Jin if she truly wanted a divorce. Hae Jin simply replied that there was nothing else they could do. She helped him inside, but later that night, she brought him his medicine as usual and promised to help him regain his memory before finalizing the divorce. She gave him a cassette tape, a keepsake from their first meeting, the first gift he had ever given her. Hyun Cheol put the tape in the player. The classical music triggered a flood of memories from their youth. Hyun Cheol had fallen for Hae-jin at first sight and given her the tape with his number on it. Afterward, Hyun Cheol looked through a photo album, seeing pictures of their children when they were younger. He chuckled, unsure whether he was the portly man or Hyun Cheol at that moment. Emerging into the living room, he found Hae-jin still awake. She told him their son had run away to search for treasure. The portly man tried to comfort Hae-jin as usual, saying all boys were like that. But Hae-jin snapped, blaming his indifference for their son's behavior. She accused him of rejecting anything imperfect, including their son, simply because he wasn't a good student. He had even told their son he wasn't his, leading to the boy's recklessness. Hearing this, Hyun Cheol felt ashamed and apologized. Hae-jin then realized she was berating a man with amnesia and apologized for her harsh words. Hyun Cheol, however, told her she was right. Back in his room, the portly man called his own daughter, not for a casual chat as usual, but to ask her to call Hyun Cheol's son and convince him to come home. Surprised to receive a call from her, Hyun Cheol's son listened as the girl urged him to appreciate his father while he still had him, reminding him how lucky he was to have a father who cared so much. Moved by her words, Hyun Cheol's son felt a pang of remorse and returned home. Seeing him, Hae-jin angrily lunged at him, but Hyun Cheol shielded his son with his own body. He asked his son if he was hungry and then personally cooked him a meal. It was the first time his son had ever seen him act like this. Father and son ate together, laughing and talking naturally. The scene touched Hae-jin deeply. That day, Yeon Hwa returned to the bank to finalize the insurance policy. Glancing around Hyun Cheol's office, she noticed the potted plants her husband loved. Her suspicion that he was her husband grew stronger. She asked Hyun Cheol, "Why did you buy insurance from me? How did you know my daughter has astigmatism? Do you know where you first met your wife? Do you know your son's blood type?" These questions stunned Hyun Cheol into silence. Seeing his reaction, Yeon Hwa couldn't continue with the paperwork and hurried away, feeling more and more certain that Hyun Cheol was her husband. Inside, the portly man, Hyun Cheol, was deeply troubled. Nevertheless, he handed out his wife's business cards to his employees, encouraging them to buy insurance from Yeon Hwa. Later, Hyun Cheol appeared on a TV program, interviewed as a man who only knew how to cook, yet somehow inhabited the body of a brilliant bank director. As the program began, the portly man fumbled with the technical questions. Then, he recalled his conversation with Lee Dak-pool about Hyun Cheol's brilliance. Suddenly, knowledge flooded his mind. He began answering fluently, sounding just like the real Hyun Cheol. Afterward, Lee Dak-pool was waiting to pick him up. Hyun Cheol's mother had splurged on a new car for him. Remembering Lee Dak-pool's daily commute, the portly man asked for a ride to a specific location. It was where his own father worked. Seeing his elderly father toiling as a laborer, the portly man felt a pang of guilt and wanted to sell the new car to give his father the money. Lee Dak-pool reminded him that with assets of 2 billion won, 50 million won was a drop in the bucket. Why sell the car? At that moment, the portly man realized how wealthy he truly was and that 50 million won was indeed insignificant. That evening, Hyun Cheol sat lost in thought when his daughter returned from school. Seeing her, he feigned cheerfulness and asked about her day. She found her father's recent behavior strange. Hyun Cheol asked about her dreams. Innocently, she replied that she didn't have any, only wanting to remain at the top of her class forever. Hearing this, Hyun Cheol told her, "That's not a dream. Being first is fine, but it's okay if you're not. Just be safe, healthy, and live a good life. Rest on your days off. You don't need to study so much." Their conversation was overheard by Hae-jin. Feeling a warmth in her heart, she called in sick to work so she could take Hyun Cheol to the cherry blossom path. The next morning, revisiting the site of their first date, she recounted the story of how they met. However, the chubby man's mind was filled with memories of his own courtship with Yeon Hwa. Indeed, fate had a strange way of working, as the chubby man had walked this very path with Yeon Hwa. But as they passed a music store, Hyun Cheol stopped, and the memory of his first encounter with Hae-jin surfaced. He had given her a CD, and she had slipped her phone number into his hand. This wasn't the chubby man's memory, but Hyun Cheol's. The chubby man couldn't believe it. Just then, Yeon Hwa called to arrange a meeting. He quickly answered, saying he was busy today but would see her tomorrow. Turning back to Hai-jin, he hastily explained that Yoon Hwa wasn't his mistress and that he had truly ended all outside relationships. He then took Hai-jin to a restaurant they used to frequent. Everything was the same, except their feelings for each other. Moreover, here, Hyun-cheol's memories became muddled with the chubby man's, leading Hai-jin to believe he had brought someone else there. This annoyed her, and her food lost its appeal. Hyun-cheol kept looking at her expression. Annoyed, she asked, "What are you looking at?" He replied, "Because you're beautiful." His words appeased her. The man, a chef by trade, inhabiting the body of a bank manager, displayed remarkable culinary skills in the kitchen. This surprised his beautiful wife. Fortunately, their son arrived, mentioning that such things were common with people who had come back from the dead. His wife's suspicions subsided. The couple prepared food together for their son to share with his friends, teasing each other as they cooked. The affectionate interaction between the soon-to-be divorced couple felt somewhat forced. That night, before bed, Hyun-cheol sat staring at his wife's reflection in the mirror, mesmerized. Caught by her, he sheepishly lay down. Hai-jin pointed out that he never slept in short sleeves and never slept on his side. Hyun-cheol adjusted his position. Hai-jin told him he didn't need to change for her. She preferred him as he was now. Her words surprised Hyun-cheol, realizing he'd given himself away. Hai-jin promptly went to sleep. That night, she recounted the plot of a movie they had both enjoyed. Hyun-cheol asked, "Were you two each other's first loves?" Hai-jin only knew that he was her first love. The next morning, Hai-jin brought her husband water. Hyun-cheol had another appointment, this time with Yoon Hwa. After seeing Hyun-cheol on the news, Yoon Hwa realized he was the man she had seen on TV the day before. After some searching, she learned he had been in a serious accident and had died and come back to life. So, Yoon Hwa went to the funeral home for answers. There, she encountered the man who had prepared Hyun-cheol's body. Unwilling to relive that frightening moment, he rushed her away without explanation. The next day at home, Yoon Hwa dressed up beautifully, surprising her daughter. She had a date with Hyun-cheol, taking him to the restaurant they used to frequent. There, she told him, "If you have something to say, say it." But the chubby man in Hyun-cheol's body wasn't ready to reveal himself, so he lied and said he had nothing to say. Yoon Hwa then gave him a gift, the shirt the chubby man had always loved. Seeing the gift, the chubby man was deeply touched but feigned happiness, not revealing his true identity. He still had things to do as Hyun-cheol. The chubby man wanted to withdraw some money to give to his father. Suddenly, the sophisticated Hyun-cheol's consciousness resurfaced, forbidding him from tainting his hard-earned money. The chubby man argued that Hyun-cheol was dead, so the money was his now. The two minds battled within Hyun-cheol, driving him to stand up abruptly, almost frantic. Despite this, he took the money and left work early. Hyun-cheol arrived at Yoon Hwa's house. At the dinner table, he pulled out a wad of cash and told her father he didn't need to work anymore, citing his bad back and urging him to avoid further strain and illness. The family was stunned. How did he know about her father's back pain? Realizing he'd slipped up, Hyun-cheol quickly steered the conversation towards the food. The portly man, thrilled to be eating his wife's cooking again after so long, devoured the meal without a word. Their daughter brought up the idea of taking a family photo. So, they posed for a picture, just like they used to, but with Hyun-cheol taking the portly man's place in the family portrait. Hyun-cheol's former mistress was summoned to the CEO's office. He promised her a promotion to vice president on the condition that she eliminate Hyun-cheol, deeming him no longer valuable in their illicit activities. Meanwhile, oblivious to this, Hyun-cheol was busy preparing a meal for his staff. Outside, everyone was shocked by the news of his demotion. Dak-pool rushed in to inform him, but Hyun-cheol calmly went out and invited everyone to eat. Though disappointed by the demotion notice, he maintained a gentle smile when the concerned vice president came to console him, assuring him he would manage and urging him to join the others for the meal. Lost in thought, Hyun-cheol unconsciously played the music he used to listen to. When he opened his eyes, it was as if a different person emerged. He stepped out with his usual suave demeanor, walking coldly and directly into the CEO's office. He confronted the CEO, reminding him of a past warning against assisting powerful external figures, a warning the CEO had ignored. The CEO, realizing the true Hyun Cheol had returned, acknowledged the shift. Hyun Cheol requested 1 month to restore his branch to its leading position. Exiting the office, he reverted to the portly man's persona. A strange taxi suddenly stopped in front of him. It took him to a familiar cherry blossom-lined street, where he ran into Yoon Hwa. When her scarf fell, he picked it up and placed it back around her neck. But when she asked if he was her husband, he denied it again, claiming to be Hyun Cheol, a bank branch manager, not her husband. They turned their backs to each other, the portly man heartbroken but unable to reveal the truth. This fateful encounter was orchestrated by 2 Grim Reapers, Otto and a senior Grim Reaper, who had led them to a place filled with their shared memories. Despite being surrounded by these happy memories, the portly man remained silent, infuriating Otto. He told the senior Grim Reaper to stop interfering and causing Yoon Hwa further pain. Otto then transformed into the taxi driver and drove Yoon Hwa. He tried to use music to soothe her troubled heart, but every song he played was melancholic, amplifying her suppressed emotions. Even upbeat tunes couldn't drown out her heartbreaking sobs. By the Han River, the portly man was also consumed by grief. He had just denied his true identity. He took out his ID card, looked at his real face one last time, and threw it into the river. He still had unfinished business as Hyun Cheol. Through various schemes, Hyun Cheol's former mistress finally achieved her promotion to vice president. When a kind employee brought her personal computer to her, she snapped, forbidding anyone from touching her belongings, and then loudly ordered Dak Pool around. This sparked gossip among the bank staff. Her 4-level promotion seemed irregular, effectively leapfrogging the existing vice president. Suddenly, she was sitting beside him as an equal in the meeting. Hyun Cheol returned and led the meeting, declaring their commitment to regaining the top spot within a month through dedicated effort, and appealing to wealthy clients to invest in the bank. His former mistress, without even listening, immediately opposed his proposals. Hyun Cheol simply smirked and asked her, "Was our past relationship that bad? Why do you hate me so much?" The question stunned her into silence, leaving her speechless as the entire staff stared. She remained quiet, unable to respond. After the meeting, the employees hit the streets to distribute flyers. Afterwards, they even visited a temple to pray for success. Meanwhile, Hyun Cheol sought out a gangster acquaintance of the portly man. Claiming to be the portly man's close friend, he gained the gangster's trust, securing a promise to deposit all his assets, gold and silver, into Hyun Cheol's bank. However, in Hyun Cheol's body, the portly man's alcohol tolerance was no longer the same. He passed out on the table. Hyun Cheol was rushed to the emergency room. Unsure what to do, the gangster called Hyun Cheol's family using his phone. Yoon Hwa's number was saved as wife in the contacts. This reinforced Yoon Hwa's suspicions, which she had almost dismissed. Meanwhile, after speaking with Hyun Cheol's sister, Dak Pool began to piece together his friend's resurrection. He started to suspect that Hyun Cheol wasn't actually Hyun Cheol. He tried calling him, only to learn he was in the Dak Pool quickly informed Hae-jin. It turned out Hyun Cheol was allergic to Ki, something the portly man didn't know. As Dak Pool was about to question Hyun Cheol, Hae-jin arrived. The three were leaving when Yoon Hwa rushed in. Seeing Hae-jin, Yoon Hwa claimed she was visiting a friend, not Hyun Cheol. Hae-jin felt an immediate dislike, but seeing her husband's gaze towards Yoon Hwa, she became convinced there was something more between them. Dak Pool, noticing this, quickly nudged Hyun Cheol to go home with his wife. Back home, Hyun Cheol saw the box of the portly man's belongings he had brought back. Hae-jin questioned him about them. Hyun Cheol claimed they belonged to a friend and insisted his relationship with Yoon Hwa was purely platonic. Hae-jin appeared to believe him but remained suspicious. To be safe, the next day, Hyun Cheol brought the portly man's notebook to work. Looking over the recipes, he felt nostalgic. Suddenly, a memory of Hyun Cheol writing something flashed back. This was a memory of the real Hyun Cheol. It revealed the existence of an important notebook hidden in the bottom drawer. Hyun Cheol managed to break the lock. Inside was the notebook where Hyun Cheol had meticulously recorded business evaluations and daily transactions. At the end of the notebook, Hyun Cheol had documented the CEO's request to help some officials secure loans. He had refused, sensing something wasn't right. Reading these entries, the portly man understood how cautious Hyun Cheol truly was. Just then, the gangster arrived with the money as promised. Stacks of cash were brought into the bank. Dak Pool was surprised by his friend's close ties with a gangster. The staff were also astonished, having never seen so much money in person. The cash was in bundles, requiring 3 or 4 employees to count. The money counting machine worked overtime. This influx of cash significantly boosted the bank's revenue. Meanwhile, the police officer continued investigating the portly man's accident. He identified a suspect. After some investigation, he located the vehicle that had captured the suspect's presence that day. To aid in his pursuit, the officer asked Yoon Hwa to sketch the suspect. He also questioned her about why, despite Hyun Cheol supposedly being a friend of her husband, there was no record of communication between them in the portly man's call history. Yoon Hwa was unable to provide a satisfactory answer. The officer then visited Hyun Cheol's bank and encountered Dak Pool. Learning Dak Pool was Hyun Cheol's childhood friend, the officer showed him a picture of the portly man. Dak Pool had no idea who he was. At that moment, Yoon Hwa arrived to see Hyun Cheol. The officer informed Dak Pool that Yoon Hwa was the wife of the man in the picture. Dak Pool was stunned to realize that Yoon Hwa was the portly man's wife. He had been harboring suspicions about Hyun Cheol's identity, and now the truth seemed to be unfolding. The officer told Yoon Hwa that he suspected Hyun Cheol was connected to her husband's death. Yoon Hwa denied it, alluding to unbelievable events. Dak Pool also questioned Yoon Hwa about her relationship with Hyun Cheol. Their cryptic exchange left the officer confused, but he persisted. That night, the officer learned from a bank employee that the portly man's debts were paid off immediately after his death. A dead man couldn't pay debts. Something was amiss. He felt he was closing in on the truth. On his way home, the officer was suddenly threatened from behind by the suspect. The suspect held him at knife point, leading him to a secluded area with the intention of silencing him. However, the officer reacted quickly, fighting back. Upon seeing his face revealed, the desperate suspect stabbed the officer multiple times in the stomach and fled. Strangely, as he walked, the officer's wounds vanished, the bleeding stopped, and his stomach looked as if it had never been stabbed. Back at the police station, he checked again, still disbelieving his eyes. He then received a message and rushed to a location believed to be the suspect's hideout. Upon breaking in, he found the suspect already dead. While developing photos for work, Hai Jin came across her old wedding pictures. Reminiscing about the happiest time of her life, she decided to visit Hyun Cheol at the bank. There, she unexpectedly encountered his former mistress. Unashamed, the mistress claimed she was no longer interested in Hyun Cheol. Hai Jin simply retorted, wishing her a lifetime of anxiety about infidelity in any future marriage. When she went to see her husband, Dak Pool intercepted her. He explained that Hyun Cheol was under immense pressure to revive the bank and had no free time. He took the opportunity to ask Hai Jin if she had noticed anything different about Hyun Cheol. Hai Jin mentioned that Hyun Cheol had suddenly learned to cook. This worried Dak Pool greatly. Hai Jin, now aware of her husband's work stress, was equally concerned. At home, she asked her husband if she could help in any way. She suggested investing in the supermarket where she worked, which could benefit both of them. Hyun Cheol thanked her for her support and went to meet Dak Pool. After his conversation with Hai Jin, Dak Pool had been deep in thought. He invited Hyun Cheol out for drinks and, fueled by alcohol, asked the crucial question: "Are you Hyun Cheol from class 12A8? The portly man, inhabiting Hyun Cheol's body, could no longer lie. Seeing Dak Pool's distress, he confessed, "I'm sorry, I'm Hyun Cheol from class 12A5. Dak Pool finally understood that his true friend was gone. Dak Pool sobbed uncontrollably, mourning his friend. The next morning at work, Dak Pool was noticeably distant with Hyun Cheol. To him, Hyun Cheol was no longer his close friend. Meanwhile, after Hai Jin's suggestion the previous day, Hyun Cheol met with her boss to discuss a collaboration. The boss then realized Hyun Cheol was the husband of the woman he liked. Seeing Hyun Cheol in person, he knew he didn't stand a chance. Afterwards, Hyun Cheol met his wife for lunch. Noticing her unhappiness, he inquired and learned that their daughter's grades had been slipping because she always strived for first place to earn her father's praise. When her rank dropped, she lied to her mother about it. Hyun-cheol comforted Hae-jin, promising to talk to their daughter. That night, he went to her room and told her that being first wasn't the most important thing in life. All he wanted was for her to be safe and healthy. His daughter burst into tears and hugged him. Later that night, before bed, Hae-jin thanked Hyun-cheol for lifting the burden off their children's shoulders, and hers as well. She suggested he take it easy now, that he didn't need to strive to be number one anymore. Hyun-cheol explained that he always pushed himself because he wanted his children to be proud of him, to be a model father and husband. Hae-jin replied that even if he lost his top ranking, there was no shame in it. The fact that he was alive was a miracle in itself. She thanked him for being alive. Hyun-cheol felt a pang of guilt hearing those words, because the person alive was actually the overweight man, not the real Hyun-cheol. What was a miracle for Hae-jin was a tragedy for Yeon Hwa. Without her husband, Yeon Hwa was desperate, selling insurance and even resorting to measures that got her kicked out by security guards. Despite this, she remained optimistic. That day, she took out her husband's phone, dialed her own number from it, and talked to herself. It was their daughter's birthday, but her husband wasn't there. Yet, why did she still feel his presence in the world? As she spoke, Yeon Hwa's grief overwhelmed her, and she wept. For her birthday, their daughter gathered with Hyun-cheol's son's group of friends. Somehow, the two children had become close. The group gathered to blow out the birthday candles, and then lay down together, looking up at the starry sky. The overweight man's daughter mentioned that her father used to say that people who die become stars. Her father was probably a star in the sky now. Suddenly, the stars seemed to rearrange themselves, forming the words "Happy Birthday," as if comforting her. Back with Hyun-cheol, the next morning as he was preparing for work, in the elevator, his past memories flooded back. He remembered calling the CEO and recording the conversation. Immediately, he called Hae-jin and asked about the phone he'd used before the accident. As Hae-jin was about to retrieve it for him, she witnessed her husband being handcuffed and arrested by the police. It turned out the police suspected Hyun-cheol of orchestrating the overweight man's accident and believed he had killed the suspect from the previous day. They found Hyun-cheol's tie clip at the scene. Fortunately, Dak-pool could vouch for Hyun-cheol's whereabouts at the time of the murder, as they had been drinking together. Hyun-cheol understood the police's suspicions. He explained the forged loan, which had been paid off after his accident. It seemed someone was trying to frame both him and the overweight man. Just then, Yeon Hwa arrived. Seeing Hyun-cheol being arrested, she flew into a rage, berating the police. Hae-jin was bewildered and asked Yeon Hwa what right she had to react more strongly than his own wife. What was the relationship between Yeon Hwa and her husband? Unable to bear it any longer, Dak-pool called Hyun-cheol out to his car to talk. He urged him to tell Hae-jin the truth and stop hurting her. The overweight man inside Hyun-cheol was also deeply conflicted. He had initially intended to use this new identity to heal Hae-jin's pain and then leave, but things had gone much further than he anticipated. How could he possibly reveal the truth now? Tell her that her husband, the father of her children, was long dead? Dak-pool pressed further, asking what about his real wife and child? No matter what, someone would end up suffering. Hyun-cheol's former mistress stared at her 1 billion won account balance on her screen, suddenly unhappy. She called a mysterious figure, claiming to know a huge secret, enough to bury everything. Just then, Hyun-cheol entered, and she quickly hung up, pretending to have been speaking with a client. He asked her, "Do you remember the employee who approved the fake loan in the overweight man's name?" He then hinted about someone planting his tie clip at the murder scene. Hearing his tone, she worried that his memory had returned. Indeed, it was she who had stolen his tie clip. She was the one behind the murder. Suddenly, she feigned dizziness and asked to leave early. The next day at the bank, a client adamantly demanded the return of assets the mistress was holding for her, but she had taken leave the day before. Luckily, in her haste, she had forgotten the key to the safety deposit box. Hyun-cheol quickly opened it for the client. Inside, however, was a USB drive that didn't belong to her. Suspicious, Hyun-cheol plugged it in. It contained a ledger detailing the crimes of several large corporations. He immediately informed the police, suggesting that the mistress was likely trying to escape. He then handed over the evidence he had. The police immediately alerted their colleagues to investigate the mistress's immigration records. By evening, they had determined her escape route and apprehended her. Meanwhile, Hyun Cheol was summoned by the CEO. Seeing that the corporation he'd helped had been caught, the CEO immediately shifted the blame to Hyun Cheol. Hyun Cheol, seemingly revitalized, retorted that he had explicitly advised against the loan, and it was the CEO's stubbornness that had led to this. The CEO then challenged him for proof. Hyun Cheol remembered the recorded call and rushed his old phone to a repair shop, but the damage was too extensive. The owner couldn't fix it. Despondent, Hyun Cheol sat outside his home, lost in thought. His son joined him, and through their conversation, Hyun Cheol realized that it had been his real daughter's birthday the day before. Overwhelmed with guilt, the overweight man inside Hyun Cheol immediately sought out his daughter to apologize for forgetting her birthday. Understandingly, she said it was okay that he'd forgotten, as he was a stranger. Then, she spoke of missing her father. The overweight man inside Hyun Cheol felt his heart ache. On his way back, passing a church, he went inside to ask God how he could end everyone's suffering. The priest told Hyun Cheol that honesty was the only way. Hyun Cheol confessed his desire to return to his own family, but admitted the path was incredibly difficult. The priest asked what was holding him back, circumstance or his growing affection for his new wife. Hyun Cheol wrestled with his conscience. He asked the priest if he would be forgiven if he truly had developed feelings for Hae-jin. His soul belonged to the overweight man, but his mind and heart were still Hyun Cheol's. Perhaps this was the source of his conflict. This conversation with the priest was, in fact, orchestrated by the two Grim Reapers. Otto watched as a distraught Hyun Cheol exited the church, his gaze filled with despair as he looked at the senior Grim Reaper. Returning home, seeing Hae-jin, Hyun Cheol didn't know how to face her. Finally, Hae-jin offered him a drink and asked, "What is your relationship with Yeon Hwa and her child?" Hyun Cheol remained silent, instead handing her signed divorce papers. Hae-jin had once desperately wanted to end their relationship, but now, faced with his unprompted agreement, she was heartbroken and sobbed openly. At the same time, Yeon Hwa received a text from Hyun Cheol stating he would soon return to his rightful place. Clutching the divorce papers, a confused Hae-jin called Yeon Hwa for a meeting to demand answers. The two women, previously strangers, now faced each other with resentment. Hae-jin asked Yeon Hwa to explain her relationship with her husband. Yeon Hwa didn't hesitate, demanding that Hae-jin return her husband. Infuriated, Hae-jin retorted, "You're mistaken, Yeon Hwa. The phrase return applies only to what belongs to you, not to what belongs to someone else." Yeon Hwa explained how her husband, a chef, had died suddenly and mysteriously. Then, Hae-jin's husband, with the same name, who should have died, survived, possessing all her husband's habits and knowledge. Seeing Hae-jin's continued denial, Yeon Hwa showed her the text message from Hyun Cheol. Recognizing her husband's number, Hae-jin was devastated. She couldn't believe this unbelievable truth. "Yeon Hwa, this is all a delusion. Please stay away from my husband," she pleaded. Despite her arguments, Yeon Hwa was left with no choice but to return home, heartbroken and silent. Later, Yeon Hwa found her father-in-law ill. Not knowing what to do, she called Hyun Cheol for help. He arrived, deeply concerned, immediately inquiring about his father's condition. The doctor diagnosed pneumonia. Hyun Cheol was puzzled, as his father had never had pneumonia before, except for a single illness 8 years prior. At this point, Yeon Hwa's suspicions were confirmed. She created an opportunity for the two to talk privately. Facing the overweight man's father in his son's body, Hyun Cheol declared, "I am your son." Contrary to his expectations, his father wasn't surprised, calmly replying that he already knew. "But continue living as you are now. There, you are well-dressed, well-educated, and a successful director. As a father, I couldn't give you that simple life, instead burdening you with a life in the kitchen." He urged his son, abandon the identity of the overweight man and be Hyun Cheol forever. Overhearing this, Yeon Hwa felt a pang of sorrow for her own fate. Later, the two sat down and talked. Hyun Cheol admitted to being the overweight man, Yeon Hwa's husband. However, he possessed the memories of both men. He was no longer the overweight man with blood type B. He was Song Hyun Cheol, blood type A bank branch director. and the legal father of 2 other children. He had to resolve the real Song Hyun-cheol's situation. Yoon Hwa couldn't understand why her husband was concerned with another man's affairs. She went to Dak-pool, asking him to influence Hyun-cheol to reason with him. But Dak-pool, despite understanding Yoon Hwa's pain, advised her to give Hyun-cheol more time. Exasperated, Yoon Hwa cried out, "Why does everyone treat me this way? My husband, my father-in-law, even you. Why won't anyone take my side and understand me?" She left in tears. The Grim Reaper in black followed, feeling incredibly guilty, unsure how to alleviate their suffering. Meanwhile, Hyun-cheol participated in an event at Hae-jin's supermarket. Acting as if she knew nothing, Hae-jin invited him to dinner. There, Hyun-cheol instinctively ordered Hae-jin's favorite sauce, remembering her preference. Touched, Hae-jin remarked, "You really are my husband. You remember everything, don't you?" Hyun-cheol remained silent, neither confirming nor denying. On their way home, Hae-jin reminisced about their past, their early dates. She suggested they go for a bike ride to relive those memories. Hae-jin fell off her bike, just like before, and Hyun-cheol, just like before, reacted with alarm and worry. Seeing this, Hae-jin became even more convinced he was her husband. He couldn't be anyone else. Yet, despite their close proximity, their arms brushing against each other, neither dared to hold on. Hae-jin asked if Hyun-cheol had something he wanted to tell her. Was it because they kept avoiding talking that things had become so complicated? Hyun-cheol looked at Hae-jin and said softly that if she had spoken up like this before, things might have been different. Perhaps that person had also been waiting for her to speak first. Hae-jin's heart beat faster. Why did he say that person? But once again, Hyun-cheol said nothing more, just walked away, then looked back at her with a smile. Hae-jin couldn't shake her suspicion. While Hyun-cheol was showering, she took his phone and called the number saved as wife's voice. Her heart sank when the person who answered was Yoon Hwa. What's more, Yoon Hwa called out, "Honey?" Startled, Hae-jin hung up. She then called her own number from his phone, only to find that she was saved as Aunt. But when Hyun-cheol came out, Hae-jin pretended nothing had happened. However, the moment Yoon Hwa called, Hyun-cheol knew the truth was slowly unraveling. He didn't explain, nor did he reveal anything, but simply went to bed as usual. Hae-jin, replaying everything he'd said since the accident, realized he wasn't her husband. Yet, he remembered all their shared memories. This clinging thread of hope made her want to believe he truly was her husband. These thoughts tormented both wives throughout the night. The next morning, everything seemed normal. Hyun-cheol even made breakfast for his children and wife. Hae-jin ate cheerfully and saw him off to work. Once in the car, however, the simple act of forgetting to release the parking brake overwhelmed her, and she burst into tears, remembering the shirt with Yoon Hwa's family photo she'd seen in Hyun-cheol's room the night before. The pain of potentially losing him again made Hae-jin sob uncontrollably. Meanwhile, as Hyun-cheol was driving to work, a car cut him off, startling him. The memory of the previous accident flooded back, but this time, it was Hyun-cheol's memory. The dapper, older gentleman within Hyun-cheol found his memories and habits returning, stronger than before, his own spirit resurging. Things weren't easy for Yoon Hwa either. She spoke to her father-in-law, asking why he told Hyun-cheol not to come back. "He's my husband. Why should he live with another woman?" Her father-in-law, also heartbroken, said that Hyun-cheol was a different person now. "If he truly were your husband, why did you send him away when he first came back?" Yoon Hwa was then struck by the memory of the day Hyun-cheol, having escaped the hospital, had come to her, tearfully claiming to be the older gentleman. It was she who had yelled at him and driven him away. Despite this, Yoon Hwa was determined to get her husband back. She called Dak-pool to ask for his location. Hearing he was at an event at Hae-jin's supermarket, Yoon Hwa panicked. She immediately went to the supermarket to confront Hae-jin. The moment Hyun-cheol saw Hae-jin, he smiled, but her face was grim. Turning, he saw Yoon Hwa had arrived. Without hesitation, she marched up to Hyun-cheol and said, "Why are you working here? You promised to have lunch with me." Not to be outdone, Hae-jin stepped forward and told Hyun-cheol he was having lunch with her. Seeing the tension between the two women, Hae-jin's boss, feeling awkward, invited them all to lunch together. At the table, Yoon Hwa made no attempt to hide her claim on Hyun Cheol, making the meal uncomfortable for everyone. As they left, Yoon Hwa made sure to text Hyun Cheol, reminding him to come home for dinner that night. Later, Hyun Cheol also received a text from Hae Jin, inviting him to dinner at her place. Hyun Cheol stood caught between two wives, unsure what to do. That evening, Yoon Hwa meticulously prepared the house and cooked dinner. At the same time, Hae Jin also cooked a careful meal and waited anxiously for a text from her husband. Both women waited with bated breath to see Hyun Cheol's choice. Finally, doorbells rang at both houses. But at Yoon Hwa's door, it was only a deliveryman. Hyun Cheol's choice was to return to Hae Jin. At the dinner table, Hae Jin played their favorite music and reminisced about their shared memories. However, Hyun Cheol's expression was somber, filled with regret for Hae Jin's lost love. He said they had once loved each other, but had missed their chance. He thought time would heal the wounds, but perhaps it had only deepened her pain. "I'm sorry. I'm not Hyun Cheol, your husband. I'm just someone borrowing his body and sharing his memories." With that, Hyun Cheol apologized to Hae Jin and left. Hae Jin, fighting back tears, ran after him, embracing him tightly from behind. But no matter how much she cried and pleaded, the older gentleman within Hyun Cheol was returning to his real family. Back in the home he'd longed for, eating the meal his wife had prepared, Hyun Cheol found no joy in it. Yoon Hwa tried to lift his spirits, but was met with indifference. After dinner, Hyun Cheol spoke with his father, who no longer recognized the man he once was. Later that night, the older gentleman and Yoon Hwa talked. Yoon Hwa said she would go to Hae Jin's house the next day to pack his things, but Hyun Cheol stopped her, telling her not to hurt the children's mother anymore. Yoon Hwa couldn't believe her ears. Her husband was defending another woman. She reminded him that she was his wife, and their daughter was his child. However, while Hyun Cheol's body was present, his heart seemed to be elsewhere. That night, lying beside each other, Yoon Hwa saw only her husband's indifferent back. Hyun Cheol himself felt like a stranger in his own home. Even his clothes no longer fit. Hyun Cheol's physical form was slowly overpowering the older gentleman's spirit. Before dawn, Hyun Cheol went to work. Worried he would go to Hae Jin, Yoon Hwa called her, saying that Hyun Cheol had spent the night at her house and that she would be coming to retrieve his clothes. This enraged Hae Jin. She retorted that the clothes belonged to her husband. Chu Hyun Cheol was her husband, and Yoon Hwa needed to stop being unreasonable. Hae Jin hung up and sobbed. Meanwhile, since her arrest, the mistress had steadfastly denied the charges. Seeing this, the police officer brought Hyun Cheol in to speak with her. With his memories almost fully restored, Hyun Cheol told his former mistress that someone like her couldn't have orchestrated everything alone. There had to be someone behind it all. Struck a nerve, the mistress flew into a rage, screaming like a madwoman. Then, she demanded a lawyer. While outside, she called the chairman, demanding a large sum of money to handle the legal proceedings. The chairman, furious upon learning that Hyun Cheol had regained his memory, summoned one of Hyun Cheol's subordinates, bribing him to testify against Hyun Cheol and make him the scapegoat. Afterward, Hyun Cheol's rival, who had always envied him, approached the chairman, informing him that Hyun Cheol had exceeded his authority by approving an excessive loan to the SV Group. They suggested the chairman pin all the blame on Hyun Cheol, using this opportunity to take him down before he exposed everything. Immediately after, the rival met with Hyun Cheol, informing him that he was about to face a disciplinary hearing for exceeding his lending authority. Despite Hyun Cheol's denials, the system clearly indicated his fault. The only person who knew the truth was the assistant manager, because that night he had witnessed the mistress secretly accessing Hyun Cheol's computer. It was she who had authorized the loan under Hyun Cheol's name. The assistant manager told Hyun Cheol's rival about this, explaining that Hyun Cheol was being wrongly accused and that he could testify to that effect. But the rival questioned why the assistant manager was at the bank at that late hour. He advised the assistant manager to stay silent, promising to promote him to manager in Hyun Cheol's place. The disciplinary hearing proceeded. Hyun Cheol faced a panel of 4 or 5 directors united against him. The bribed employee also testified, placing the blame squarely on Hyun Cheol. Undeterred, Hyun Cheol demanded that the chairman testify as a witness. Despite the board's objections, Hyun Cheol was legally entitled to this. The hearing was postponed until the chairman agreed to testify. It turned out the bribed employee's wife had a serious illness. Faced with financial pressure and his wife's health, he had felt compelled to comply. Despite this, Hyun Cheol didn't blame him and even offered words of encouragement, increasing the employee's shame. The wanted notice for the murderer was released. Frightened, he rushed to dispose of the evidence. However, being a first-time offender, he clumsily burned his hand. The mistress, his accomplice, panicked, urging him to deal with Hyun Cheol. The murderer, getting into his car, reassured her, saying Hyun Cheol was about to be fired. Unexpectedly, the mastermind behind everything was revealed to be Hyun Cheol's rival. The day of the resumed disciplinary hearing arrived. Hyun Cheol tried unsuccessfully to access the recording on his broken phone. Despondent and about to attend the hearing, he was approached by the assistant manager. He had decided to tell the truth about sneaking into Hyun Cheol's office and witnessing the mistress tampering with his computer. He was prepared to face the consequences of his actions, rather than see Hyun Cheol suffer unjustly. Hyun Cheol, instead of being angry, worried about the impact testifying would have on the assistant manager. He reassured him, saying he had a plan. Hyun Cheol walked into the disciplinary hearing with newfound confidence. The chairman, equally confident, entered and immediately sat in the presiding chair. Hyun Cheol insisted he take the witness seat. When questioned, the chairman vehemently denied coercing Hyun Cheol into signing the loan agreement. Instead of worrying, Hyun Cheol calmly asked, "Are you sure?" He then played the recording from his phone. The chairman's voice echoed through the room, admitting to forcing Hyun Cheol to sign the agreement despite his objections. At this point, none of the board members could save him. Hyun Cheol wished the chairman well in his upcoming trial and walked out, leaving the disgraced directors in his wake. Outside, back in his car, Hyun Cheol played his favorite music. He recalled how just moments before, a heavenly light had shone down, miraculously fixing his broken phone. It must have been the work of the god of clothes. Soon after, the bribed employee wrote a letter exposing the chairman. Everything was finally resolved, except for the family situation. Hai Jin, after a sleepless night, arranged to meet with Yoon Hwa. She thanked her for letting her husband stay the night, but Yoon Hwa insisted it was only natural, as he was her husband. Hai Jin firmly disagreed. She told Yoon Hwa that if she truly loved the older gentleman, she should let Hyun Cheol go. No amount of explaining could make the world see Hyun Cheol as that man. If Hyun Cheol stayed with Yoon Hwa, it would be a mistake. After all, he couldn't even wear the shirt she had given him anymore. With that said, Hai Jin left, leaving Yoon Hwa filled with bitterness. That evening, she waited for Hyun Cheol to come home. Seeing his exhaustion, she didn't know how to offer comfort. Hyun Cheol coldly visited his father, then showered and went to bed. Yoon Hwa wondered when they had become strangers. Meanwhile, overcome with grief, Hai Jin fell seriously ill. Her worried daughter called Hyun Cheol. Lying awake, Hyun Cheol received his daughter's call. Ignoring Yoon Hwa's protests, he quickly dressed and rushed to Hai Jin's house. Yoon Hwa, unfazed by the rain, determinedly waited for her chubby hubby to return, but Hyun Cheol remained steadfastly by Hai Jin's side. Seeing her husband before her, Hai Jin thought she was hallucinating. When she realized it was truly him, she embraced Hyun Cheol tightly. It turned out their love hadn't faded, merely been obscured. Hyun Cheol stayed the entire night, caring for Hai Jin. Yoon Hwa waited until the rain stopped. But by daybreak, Hyun Cheol was gone from Hai Jin's side. He had, however, made porridge and left a note reminding her to eat and regain her strength. Hyun Cheol returned home to Yoon Hwa's resentment. He didn't know what to do. He felt compelled to care for Hai Jin. Yoon Hwa realized the man beside her was no longer the chubby hubby who had adored her exclusively. They lay side by side, yet worlds apart. Unable to bear it any longer, Yoon Hwa sat down to talk with Hyun Cheol. She asked the chubby hubby within Hyun Cheol if he felt uncomfortable in her home. He said no. "But I do," she replied. "Please leave. Go back to where you belong." Yoon Hwa said she didn't want to be with someone who no longer loved her. He was no longer her chubby hubby. His love was no longer here. The person she loved was no longer this Hyun Cheol. Sent away, Hyun Cheol went to Deedak Pool's house. He'd had one family, then suddenly two, and now he had nowhere to go. Didak Pool advised Hyun Cheol to return and be Hai-jin's Hyun Cheol. He felt Hyun Cheol had become the Hyun Cheol of old, no longer a stranger. Seeing Hyun Cheol's hesitation, Didak Pool called Hai-jin and told her to pick up her husband. Upon learning this, Hai-jin arranged to meet Yoon Hwa. The two women met again, but without the animosity of before. Hai-jin looked at Yoon Hwa with admiration. What sacrifice it must have taken to let her husband go. Yoon Hwa sadly said she had no other choice. Living with someone more distant than a stranger was worse than setting him and herself free. Hai-jin thanked Yoon Hwa. She went to the photo studio and looked at her wedding pictures. She realized she also bore some responsibility for their marriage's failure. If God gave her a second chance, she would do her best. Yoon Hwa truly was a noble woman. She chose to love by seeing the one she loved happy, even if it meant letting him go. Back home, Hai-jin asked to talk with Hyun Cheol. She told him, "Let's get a divorce." Before Hyun Cheol could despair, Hai-jin continued, "Let's start over. Together." Hyun Cheol smiled and took her hand. They decided to start anew. Hai-jin asked Hyun Cheol, "Did the sophisticated Hyun Cheol love me, or was it the later Hyun Cheol?" Hyun Cheol didn't answer but asked in return, "Do you want the former Hyun Cheol to love you, or the me of now?" Meaning, did she love Hyun Cheol, her husband, or Hyun Cheol with the chubby hubby's soul? In the end, they both asked questions they couldn't answer. Seeing that Hyun Cheol hadn't been dealt with, and had even taken care of the CEO and his mistress, the old flame rushed to Hyun Cheol's rival. But the cunning man feigned innocence, denying any collusion with her. At this point, the mistress asked him why he had to resort to murder. He simply gave a sinister smile. The ex-mistress realized then that she too could become one of his victims. Returning home, she found a visitor waiting. It was Hyun Cheol. He had come to ask why she had done those things. The mistress hadn't expected her rival to go so far as to kill. She told Hyun Cheol she had only wanted to make money, never intending for him to be harmed. Hyun Cheol now knew his accident hadn't been accidental. Just like the chubby hubby, his car's brakes had been cut. The thought of someone wanting him dead agitated Hyun Cheol. Memories of the night before the accident surfaced, though they remained hazy. Hyun Cheol went to the vice president, asking if he had entered his room that night on his rival's orders. The vice president was surprised. How did Hyun Cheol know? Hyun Cheol's suspicions were confirmed. He immediately called the police, warning them about his rival's potential flight. The next morning, the ex-mistress called, begging for Hyun Cheol's help, but he refused, telling her to await her deserved punishment. Sitting beside him, Didak Pool noticed Hyun Cheol's demeanor resembled his old friend at work. Hyun Cheol's memories became clearer. The day after taking on the chubby hubby's case, he had checked the bank's records, discovering his rival's involvement. Exposed, the rival had begged Hyun Cheol for forgiveness. He had only wanted a promotion. But immediately afterward, he had hired an assassin to harm both Hyun Cheol and the chubby hubby. Hyun Cheol confronted him, urging him to confess. His rival, not yet grasping the situation, challenged him. But after Hyun Cheol revealed the events of the night before the accident, his rival panicked. He immediately disguised himself and fled the country. Following these events, the bank's reputation plummeted. Hyun Cheol appeared on television, apologizing to customers for the scandals. He confidently vowed to restore the bank's reputation. Then he received a call from Hai-jin. They planned a makeup trip and headed to the beach. They explored the fish market and played in the waves. Unexpectedly, trouble struck. As they walked hand in hand along the breakwater, Hyun Cheol about to kiss Hai-jin, the fleeing rival appeared. Desperate, he pulled out a gun, determined to kill Hyun Cheol. But as the bullet was fired, death itself seemed to intervene, stopping it. Hyun Cheol told Hai-jin, "Wait for me. I'm going after him." After a chase, Hyun Cheol stopped his rival's car. The police quickly apprehended him. Hyun Cheol returned to Hai-jin, who embraced him joyfully. Though only minutes had passed, for her, it felt like a battle against fear. Everything ended well. Yoon Hwa, after much effort, became the insurance queen she aspired to be. The rival, in prison, was consumed by panic. All the dirty money he had acquired was returned to its rightful owners. His greed was rewarded with poverty. However, another battle remained. the battle for dad between Hyun Cheol's son and the chubby hubby's daughter. Their insistence on claiming him as their own led to a brawl. Hae-jin went to the police station to bail them out. She spoke privately with the chubby hubby's daughter, who, heartbreakingly understanding, apologized to Hae-jin, saying, "From now on, I won't consider Hyun Cheol my dad." Just when things seemed settled, Hyun Cheol ran into Yeon Hwa at the supermarket. He offered to carry her groceries and told her to wait for him. Unfortunately, his car was blocked by several others. As he struggled to maneuver, Yeon Hwa was struck by a car. When Hyun Cheol arrived, he found Yeon Hwa lying motionless, covered in blood. He froze. He immediately rushed her to the hospital. In that moment, he didn't know if his thoughts were his own or the chubby hubby's. Her daughter arrived and blamed him. His presence had caused this, and there wouldn't be a second miracle. Despite the doctor's efforts, Yeon Hwa's heartbeat flatlined. Her death moved even Otto, the Grim Reaper in the celestial realm. He used all his power to summon Hyun Cheol and the chubby hubby's soul within him. The sophisticated Hyun Cheol's fate was sealed. The man before Otto was a Hyun Cheol with two sets of memories existing in parallel. After meeting Otto, Hyun Cheol returned home and calmly recorded everything in his diary. He then went to Hae-jin, embracing and kissing her goodbye. He told her she had once asked if his heart belonged to the chubby hubby or the sophisticated Hyun Cheol. He honestly didn't know anymore, only that he loved her. They held each other close. From afar, Otto snapped his fingers. Time rewound, events unspooling as if they'd never happened, stopping just before the day of the accident. Hyun Cheol returned to his old, unpleasant self. His marriage to Hae-jin was once again on the brink of collapse. Meanwhile, the chubby hubby was his usual cheerful self, cooking and enjoying life. His relationship with Yeon Hwa remained warm and happy at work. Hyun Cheol was again the overbearing boss at breakfast. However, today, he didn't finish early but lingered with his subordinates, surprising everyone. The CEO called, inviting Hyun Cheol to lunch. Confused, memories of the future, the loans, the accident flooded his mind, and he declined. Outside, he ran into his mistress. She clung to him desperately, but he coldly brushed her off, leaving her stunned and bewildered. It was Hyun Cheol's birthday, and he didn't go to his mistress's house as he had before. Instead, he went home to celebrate with Hae-jin. He told her, "Quit your job and pursue your photography dreams." Hae-jin was surprised and touched. Meanwhile, the chubby hubby celebrated his birthday happily with his family. Both lives resumed as if nothing had changed. But that night, Hyun Cheol had a nightmare about the accident. He went to his study and read his diary, finding entries dated March. While it was still January, he realized he had returned from the future. The next morning, intending to drive to work, he remembered the accident and took the bus instead. That day, the chubby hubby went to the bank for a loan, but was rejected due to an existing loan. Hyun Cheol intervened, promising to resolve the issue. Upon investigation, he found discrepancies. As the chubby hubby prepared to return to the bank, Yeon Hwa stopped him. Hyun Cheol had called, assuring him he would handle everything. Memories of the accident and its aftermath flooded back. As Hyun Cheol grappled with these memories, the chubby hubby entered the room. Hyun Cheol felt a strange familiarity because the chubby hubby's soul still resided within him. He promised to resolve the loan issue, then opened his diary, reading and understanding the unfolding events. He hadn't simply returned to the past. He was Hyun Cheol with the chubby hubby's soul, back in time. Realizing this, he went to the police, instructing them to investigate the people on his list, leaving the bewildered officer speechless. Thus, Hyun Cheol, with his future knowledge, prevented the tragedies. Meanwhile, Otto and a senior Grim Reaper observed. The senior Reaper asked why Otto hadn't rewound time further. Otto replied, the sophisticated Hyun Cheol had forgotten the meaning of life. He needed to teach everyone a lesson so they could do better with a second chance. Passing the chubby hubby's restaurant, Hyun Cheol saw his happy family and felt a warmth in his heart. He returned home and told Hae-jin and the children to join him for dinner. He told his son not to feel pressured by his studies and his daughter she didn't need to be number one. He was a changed man, surprising his family. He even helped with the dishes. Later, during a walk, he apologized to Hae-jin, asking her not to leave him and to continue their life together. He stubbornly held her hand as they walked in the dark. Before bed, he mentioned taking a trip. Hai-jin felt like he was a different person. She finally agreed to the trip. Hyun-cheol even changed his phone contact for the children's mother to Hai-jin. He went to the large tree and thanked the divine for a second chance, promising to do better. Everyone's life was now complete. Sometimes we forget the value of those around us. When they're gone, regret comes too late. If we can, we should cherish those we love, because we won't get a second chance like Hyun-cheol.